Hey, heads up. How are you doing? How are you? It's good to see you. Welcome back to my house, and welcome to a new mini-series that we're getting together for you to help you think about some Bible characters during lockdown. First of all, my first question, anyone else's hair feel like it needs a bit of a cut? Mine definitely does. Second question is, what do you think we can learn from some Bible characters who were also in lockdown? That's what our new mini-series is all about. We're going to be looking at some of the Lord's people who were in lockdown, who were in isolation, who were in prison, things like that. We're going to learn what God did in them, what God provided for them, what God grew in them, and we're going to see how some of them trusted God throughout all the fear and anxiety that came with their situations. So, let's dive in. What are we going to learn from the Lord's lads in lockdown? It's good, isn't it? Today, Joseph. Give me a little wave if you know anything about the Joseph story. Joseph's story in Genesis. Yeah, a few of you. Great. Well, here's a little refresher for some of you who maybe don't know. Joseph was a young man that came from a big family. He was one of Jacob's 12 sons. And this was a big family, but it was a rather scary family at times. There was a lot of brokenness there. And God gave Joseph some dreams. When he was just a lad, he gave some dreams. Dreams that promised Joseph that God would make him great, would raise him up, would deliver him, and use him for great things. But then, suddenly, Joseph is sold into slavery. You can read about it in Genesis 37. His freedom is taken from him. He's locked in a cage, and he's in a caravan dragged by a camel. He's led into Egypt. He's sold into slavery. And not only that, he was sold by his brothers. His brothers, his own flesh and blood, turned against him and sold him into slavery. Can you imagine how he must have felt? Not knowing what would come next, not knowing when he would even have the freedom again just to go for a walk by himself, not knowing when he would get out of there, see his family again. What do you think he would have been saying to God at that moment? What would you say to God in that moment? What would you cry out to him? Would you cry in pain and fear? Would you question God? Would you yell at him? Would you would you feel abandoned by our supposedly loving Father? It's hard, isn't it? It's hard to know. Well, the Bible story doesn't exactly tell us how Joseph responded in the moment, what he felt right then, or what he prayed, or what he said. But it does give us some clues in what happened next about how Joseph reacted, how he related to God throughout all this. Do you know what happened next? It was in Potiphar's house. Mrs. Potiphar, Potiphar's wife, she was chasing after Joseph. She was chasing after, and Joseph stood firm. He lived for God. He said, how could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? That's what he said when Mrs. Potiphar wanted him to go to bed with her. Well, Joseph was sold. He was here in lockdown. His life changed forever. His freedom completely removed. And even more, he had an opportunity to wallow in his self-pity. Or he could have, right now, just decided to forget about God. Because it looked like God had forgotten about him. He could have chosen to live life in a rebellious way in this new environment, away from his believing family and friends. But, despite it all, Joseph commits to live for God. He decided to grow in trust of God every step of the way. He stepped up the ranks in Potiphar's household. God had blessed Joseph throughout all this. And actually, we can see that throughout both the fear of that isolation, that lockdown, that selling into slavery, and the blessing, Joseph rising the ranks in Potiphar's household, Joseph trusted God to live for him in both those situations. Joseph trusted God. Now, that's not all from Joseph. We got another video coming in a couple of days. More to come. Little does young Joseph know that he's about to be thrown into prison for 2 years. But why not? Let's think about what we can learn from that bit of Joseph's story. Because there are some similarities between us and him. One thing, Joseph could, throughout all of this, he could think and remember those dreams that God gave him, those promises that God gave him. The promise that one day Joseph would be made great and God would deliver him and use him for great things. Joseph knew that and he trusted in God despite whatever route God was sending him down to get there. Joseph trusted throughout it all. And we, likewise, we have a Bible full of promises that God has given to us in Jesus Christ. We've been promised that despite our sin, in Jesus, we will be given life, true life, everlasting life, a life that is so, so fantastic. And we've been promised that following Jesus, when we say yes, Jesus, that we'll be welcomed into God's family. A family that won't sell us into slavery, but a family that will be a source of peace and comfort and joy and solidarity throughout life because God really is our Father. That's a promise that's true. It's a promise that stands firm, that we can trust in. We know that this lockdown won't last forever, and we do long for our freedom. But even more, we know that this life won't last forever, and that there is a better life coming in Jesus. That's a promise. It is coming, and we can set our eyes on that day when Jesus returns. So today, here right now, in our frustration or our fear, or even just our boredom, we can remember what God has promised us, and we know what's coming next. So as God's children, as God's family, we can know that Jesus is coming back, and we can choose to live for him today.